Okay, last couple examples on 1.2. So on this one, we're going to use the quadratic formula, which is that negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared subtract 4ac all over 2a. Now we need our, I'm going to write this on here too. So a is with x squared, b is with x, c is our constant, and always has to be equal to 0. Now I want to identify my a, b, and c. So my a is with my x squared, so it's going to be 2. B is with x by itself, and it's not a plus sign, it's a subtract, so it's going to be negative 13, and C positive 21. Now that I'm going to write out the equation. So I'm not going to simplify anything either like I would when I'm working it. Negative 13 plus or minus the square root of negative 13 squared subtract 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 21. They're all under that square root. All over 2 times a, which is 2. Okay, now I'm going to start breaking this down. So I have a negative 13, so I'm going to have a positive 13, plus or minus, I'll put a little arrow here. The square root of 13 squared is 169. Subtract 4 times 2 times 21. Subtract 168. That's going to work out nice for us. All over 4. Now I'm going to scoop it back down to here. So I'm going to have 13 plus or minus the square root of 1. All over 4. Because 169 subtract 168 is 1. Now then we have the square root of 1 is 1. So 13 plus or minus 1 over 4. So I'm going to do 13 plus 1 divided by 4. And 13 subtract 1 divided by 4. 13 plus 1 would be 14 over 4. 2 goes into both of them, so I'd have 7 over 2. And that would be my answer on that one. 13 subtract 1 would be 12 over 4, and 4 goes into both of these, so it'd be 3. So my solution set to this problem, which I'm running out of room and it looks very not pretty right now, it's going to be 7/2 and 3. Where would I like to write this? I may highlight this one. 7/2 and 3. Oh, it's going to bother me. Okay. This next one, negative 3a squared plus 108 equals 0. The first thing I want to do is factor out a negative 3. So let's see. On 108 divided by 3, it is divisible by 3 and it is 36. So I'm going to factor out a negative 3. So negative 3a squared divided by negative 3 would be a positive a squared. 108 divided by a negative 3 is going to give us our subtract 36 equals 0. This is the difference of two squares. It's actually the exact same one as previous videos. So I'm going to have a negative 3 times a subtract 6 times a plus 6 equals 0. When I go to solve this, a subtract 6 equals 0 and a plus 6 equals 0. And if y'all are wondering on this why I didn't do anything with this negative 3, because negative 3 equals 0 is not true, so negative 3 isn't an answer, so I just kind of don't do it. So I have a equals 6 and a equals negative 6, and I can check that. We're just going to plug and check on this one. Negative 3 times negative 6 equals it'd help if I did it right. Negative 3 times negative 6 squared equals negative 108. Negative 108 plus 108 is 0. And then it's not going to change when I do 6 squared. So our answers are negative 6 and 6. If you have any more questions on section 1.2, please send me an email. Oh, I lied. We're not finished. So on this one, I'd recommend just doing the quadratic formula because that's going to be the easiest route. And this is the last one because on the bottom I just wrote the quadratic formula again. And then as long as you know this, you can work out any of these problems. You don't have to factor it. You don't have to do anything. If you can do the quadratic formula, you can just do the quadratic formula. My stepbrother went through his ACT and he didn't want to factor anything and he just used the quadratic formula and he did very well on it. So on this one though, it's not equal to 0 yet, so we have to rearrange it to be able to use the quadratic formula. So we have x squared plus 6x subtract 7 equals 0 because we'd have to subtract the 7 to move it to this side of the equal sign. And then that would be 0. Okay, then my a would equal 1, my b would equal 6, and my c would equal negative 7. In the quadratic formula, a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared subtract 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to have a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared subtract 4 times a times our c, which is negative 7, all over 2 times our a, which is 1. So negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared is 36, subtract 4 times 1 is 4 times a negative 7 would be a negative 28, and you can't subtract a negative, so we're going to add 28 all over 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write this one over here. Negative 6 plus or minus, what's 36 plus 28? 64. How nifty. All over 2. So I have a negative 6 plus or minus 8 all over 2. So now I'm going to break them apart. So I have negative 6 plus 8 divided by 2, and negative 6 subtract 8 divided by 2. Negative 6 plus 8 would be 2 over 2, which is 1. Negative 6 subtract 8 would be negative 14 over 2, which would be negative 7. And I can check that 1 squared is 1 plus 6, 1 plus 6 is 7. Negative 7 squared would be 49 plus a negative 42? Yeah, 49 plus 42. Or we can just calculator. So negative 7 squared plus 6 times a negative 7 equals 7. So they are both correct answers. So our answer set is negative 7 and 1. That's the end of section 1.2.